let's get started. Good evening, welcome everyone. My name is Pam Laycock, and I am the president of the Schulich Global Alumni Network, and I'm really pleased to be here, your MC here tonight. We have a really interesting event planned, and we'll get right into it. What I'd like to do first is the York University Land Acknowledgement. I have it almost memorized, but not quite, so I do have to read. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that the many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. The territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I love that last line. And now, a brief word about the reason we're here tonight and what we're going to do. The Dean's Leadership Dialogue series is about authentic conversations with inspirational leaders. Offers a window into pivotal moments that have really shaped these business leaders, the challenges that they've overcome, the lessons that they've learned along the way, and I'm sure we're going to get some great nuggets of wisdom tonight. Let me just quickly go through the agenda. We're a tiny bit behind, but that's okay. We are not going to cut short the wisdom that is coming. So we're going to start with a dialogue between Dean Zwick and Rob McEwen. I'll introduce them very, very shortly. And then we're going to open up the dialogue to the floor and see if you have some questions that you want to ask. So we'll make sure that we have time for that as well. Before we get started, though, what we'd like to do is a group photo to commemorate this time. So I'm going to jump into my seat, and who's coming to take the photo? That was far better than me doing a selfie, right? So there we go. Okay, so next thing I'd like to do is to introduce the president of the Schulich Graduate Business Council to give a welcome from our graduate students and talk about the 24-25 experience, the student experience. Pradika Mairu leads a team of 45 students on the GBC. I had no idea the GBC that was that big. 45 students making all this happen. She's also the Forte Fellow Campus Ambassador for 24-25, representing the Foundation's mission to advance women in business. Isn't that a good thing? So please welcome Pradika.
Thank you, Pam. I see a couple of folks from GBC here. Shout out, quick. Hello. Woo. Okay. All right. Very good evening, everyone. I am Pratika Mehra, the outgoing GBC president, and also a second-year MBA student, so a little sad about the fact that we're going to be wrapping up in the next week. But yes, on behalf of the graduate student community, I want to welcome you all and thank you for being here. Before we jump in, I actually want to introduce what GBC is all about. I think it's a very important part of your student life community at Schulich. We are a student-led government. We're elected by over 1,000 students at graduate level, and we essentially deliver high impact, high engagement, and high EQ leadership events for all the students who are here at Schulich. We also have a fantastic group picture of my team here. I think these are the Avengers who make sure that all the magic comes to life. But tonight, we also have another honorary GBC member here with us, Mr. Rob McEwen, who was the GBC president in the year 1978. Actually, all credit goes to Susan for getting this picture, but yes. No, but seriously, thank you, Rob, for actually breaking barriers and forging the new paths for future generations of GBC and really allowing us to raise the bar with every passing year. So thank you. Thank you for being here. This year, the council has done exceptionally well. Kudos to the team again. We have delivered over like 40 events, catering to the needs of over 1,000 students, creating unlimited memories for life. We brought back some of the most flagship events that we have, Shulympics, the Dean's Cup, which is going to be tomorrow, the finale. We're super excited about that. We also brought in the first cross-university mixer, which was with Rotman, Schulich, McGill, and Ivy Business School. And here are some of the glimpses of everything that we have done over the last 12 months. But nothing could have been possible without the support of our wonderful team here and our sponsors, the town of Huntsville, Investley, KPMG, Hyundai. These are some of the companies who have supported us with everything that we have planned. And yes, with that, over to you, Pam. Thank you again.
Wow, like those stats, like 42 events, I can't even imagine. So good on you all. And doing all of your school at the same time and graduating, I'm sure, exceptionally. So congratulations to you and the whole GBC. That was fantastic. And you all are now pre-alumni, right? So like there are so many, like Karina and Christina will want you to volunteer for all kinds of things. So GBC, you've just become alumni ambassadors. So thank you for that in advance. All right, so I now have the privilege of introducing two people who I will do a bit of an introduction and then I will ask them to come up and start the whole dialogue. First, our special guest, Rob McEwen, one of Schulich's most distinguished and high-profile alumni. Rob is an icon in Canadian business. The chairman and chief owner of McEwen Mining. Rob is a visionary entrepreneur who has built billion-dollar businesses and redefined the mining industry. And I had the pleasure of having dinner with Rob and Cheryl and just some really, really great examples of that visionary and innovation. So I'm sure you're going to hear a bit more about that. Rob and Cheryl have also made significant philanthropic contributions aimed at promoting excellence in innovation in healthcare and education. And we here at Schulich have benefited from that generosity, the name of this room being one example of that. So thank you. His extraordinary leadership has earned him the Order of Canada, induction into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, and a seat on the Dean's Global Council here at Schulich. We are truly honored to have Rob here with us tonight. Joining Rob in this conversation is Detlef Zwick, the Dean of the Schulich School of Business and the Tana H. Schulich Chair in Digital Marketing Strategy. Under the Dean's leadership, Schulich is really striving for bold new strategic initiatives, enhancing the student learning experience, program innovation, excellence in research, and really wonderful partnerships with the business and overall community. So I would like to now welcome both Dean Zwick and Rob to the floor.
Okay.
Wow.
Let's
What a crowd.
let's make sure first that the microphone's on. Yep, you can hear us? There's no reaction, so I'm...
No.
Okay. Rob, welcome.
Thank you, Della.
Comfortable for
Yeah, quite.
nice
Thank you.
conversation? I'm very excited about this. Rob, you're one of the school's most accomplished alumni. You're also a very prominent and often outspoken business leader in the community, in the Canadian business community. Around here, you're obviously also a big celebrity. We're in the McEwen Auditorium. We have an entire building named after you and Cheryl. So it's absolutely exciting to have you here tonight for this dialogue. So thank you so much for doing this. Now, one of the qualities, so I have about 4 questions where we learn a little bit about Rob, and then we go into some more specific topics. And once we get through those 4 questions, that's, I think, Pam, when we open it up to the audience. Yeah? Okay, for questions. So just be a little bit patient, but there will be time for all of you to ask some questions as well. So let's learn a little bit more about Rob, the person, and how he thinks. One of the qualities you're known for is your ability to adapt, to overcome challenges. Obviously, a necessary attitude in a tough, volatile industry such as mining. You've often spoken about resilience, and you've used the metaphor, a stream and a boulder. Basically, you've told the story about how your parents had a farm outside Toronto, And when you were a kid, you dropped a boulder into the narrow stream, and you recounted how you were amazed at how water made its way over and under and around the boulder. And that became a metaphor for you, that no matter how many obstacles you find in your way, you are always going to find your way around them. So please tell us a little bit about how your mindset works for you, how it has shaped your path from, well, actually before even coming to Schulich, all the way to where today.
All right. Well, that boulder, it blocked the stream, so the water stopped flowing downstream. And as it built up, and as Detlef said, it went around, it went under, then it went over, I thought, well, it's a good metaphor for life, that there's this flow, this energy that's constant. And every once in a while you have these obstacles that are put in front of you, but you want to look for ways around them, under them, or over them. And then after it started flowing over the top, there was music coming from the stream. And I think that's some of the benefits of experience. I had a good example growing up. My father had gone off to the war, Second World War, and came back a quadriplegic. And he came back in an iron lung, and my grandfather was a surgeon, and my father wanted to be like his father. But they said, well, your legs are probably going to go gangrene. You're going to be in bed for the rest of your life. He was 19 at the time. And we're going to cut your legs off. And my grandfather didn't think that was a good idea, nor did my father, to say. So he said, well, I'm not going to stay in bed. And he worked and worked, and I always knew him. He always got around on crutches, but he was on every continent except Antarctica. He flew a helicopter through the Arctic, and I watched him, and I thought, every time I have a problem, I used to reflect on what he faced, and thought, I don't have a problem. And that helped me look at a lot of other issues. So along the way, in the mining industry, sometimes you can get disagreements with unions. I went through a 46-month-long strike at a mine in Northern Ontario. And at one point during that, I had just gotten a bought deal from RBC. And almost as soon as the bought deal came in, there was a fax came through, and it was a letter that was addressed to me. And they basically said, if you think you're going to break the union, you're wrong. If you want blood, we'll give you blood. Remember Giant Yellowknife. And in that mine in northern, up in the Arctic, the same union members of it planted a bomb at the bottom of the mine and killed 9 people. So there was my wife here, Cheryl, and I chose to, in our house, to replace all the glass in our basement and first floor with bulletproof glass. SWAT team showed up at our house, full armor.
This was a real threat.
It was a real threat, yeah. And I hired some former undercover cops that had investigative teams, and I put a $35,000 reward on the head of the person who wrote the letter. It wasn't signed, and they said I had 30 days, but it wasn't dated, so I had to laugh at that. But we went on, and at the end of the day, I guess in the first week, 6 people left town and never came back. The strike went for 46 months. At the end of it, the union said, we're not going to be here any longer. They decertified. It was one of the first times a mine in North America had been decertified from the United Steelworkers. And our production went from 50,000 ounces a year to 500,000 ounces a year. Our costs went from $360 an ounce to $60 an ounce. So there was a 60-fold change in the economics. So that's one of them. There was another time I had a chain of companies, 5 of them, and I was methodically going through and compressing them. And over 8 years, it became one company, it became Goldcorp. And we went from, I guess, 40 cents a share to up to over $40 a share. But at one point, I was trying to put some of these companies together, And there was I had a minority interest in one company. I said, well, I want to bring that in. I knew I was hiring a new general manager that I thought would give a lift to the stock. We were having great exploration results. And so I said, all right, we're going to buy this company. We're going to take in the minority that we don't already own. And I was the CEO of the two companies. And I had, and you have these independent committees that you form to look at the fairness opinion. Well, they came back at one point and said, we can't, you need to raise the price. And I felt really unsettled by that because I thought our share price had already gone up 30% and it was a share offer, so I thought they were nicely in the money and they wanted more, and I felt the market wasn't going to reward us for that. They'd take us down. So I'm in our boardroom. I have our investment dealers, I have our corporate lawyers, and I have all my management team. And I say, you know, I woke up this morning and I don't think we should go forward with this deal. And all of a sudden, the investment dealer said, Rob, you've been working on this for quite a while, years. You're going to blow it. And they walked out of the room. Then our corporate lawyers, outside counsel, they walked out of the room. And then my senior management team walked out of the room, and I'm sitting there going, this is interesting. They don't agree. I went home, I jumped in a bath, soaked for a while, thought about it, and wrote down a couple of equations, sent it off to all my directors, and I said, we should not pay up. So went in, we had one group of directors in one boardroom and another group in another. And so in Goldcorp's, I said, I don't think we should increase the bid. And one of the directors said, no, we shouldn't. I agree. We should pull our bid. Oh, okay. So everybody agreed to that. I walked into the next boardroom and said, okay, we've looked at what you proposed. We disagree. We're not going to up our bid. We're going to pull the bid. And the head of the independent committee went, oh shit, we're going to be sued. And it was a game of poker, which they didn't play very well. Anyhow, we pulled the bid, and my CFO walked in the next morning. That was at the end of the day when we pulled it. And he said, I just looked at the quote machine. Our share price is up 10%, and the one we were going to buy is down 10%. I said, is that news? And he said, well, how'd that happen? I said, I told you. And so 6 months later, we bought it for 30% less than they were going to do.
Then you average.
But
Nice.
I think you just have to reframe it quite often and look at alternatives that aren't immediately obvious.
Right.
So,
Looking
and I think
around.
that's, and you have to take a bit of a longer term perspective, but try to simplify the situation as much as possible. And a lot of times there's smoke screens thrown up, and if you can throw a grid on that smoke screen, almost divided into little cubes, and press each one and see if there's anything in it of substance. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you'll find there's nothing in any of those cubes that have been created. And when you feel that way, you just go straight ahead.
I mean, it doesn't sound like you're taking the easy way. Everybody in the room, for example, would have told you to stay and make the deal, and then to decide, I'm not doing that. You know, great story, very impressive story. I thought the first story you're going to tell us is how you actually became the GBC president, because it wasn't your first attempt.
No, all right.
You failed elsewhere, a place we don't want to talk about.
Undergraduate at Western, and a biz prof, and I went to lunch, and it happened to be at the time they were running, it was my last year at Western, and the election for student council president was up. And he said, well, what are you going to do after you graduate? And I said, well, I'm going to the Gaspé to study French with my girlfriend, and then we're off to, then I want to do an MBA. So, and he said, you ever thought about student council? I said, I don't know anyone on a student council. No, I hadn't. And that was lunch on a Friday afternoon, And I was a ski instructor at the time, and I was going to meet other ski instructors at the pub, the Spoken Rim. And I had to meet some of the other instructors at the ski club office. So I'm walking over there, and I walked by the student council office, and I walked in, I stopped. I said, I should go ask. So I sat down with the president and then the treasurer of the Students' Council, and I was about an hour late for meeting everyone in the pub. So I sat down, and someone said, where were you? And I said, well, I was just talking to the Student Council. We're having a beer, and a girl walks in I knew, and she said, I hear you're running for Student Council president. Really? Okay, and then someone else walked in and said it. I said, where's this coming from? I thought about it over the weekend, said, well, let's throw my name in. I was living with two friends, and they said, well, you need 20 nominations, 20 signatures. I said, okay. And they said, let's go to the biggest cafeteria, and you're going to stand over there, and we're going to look for the prettiest girls in the room, and we're going to ask their name and get their phone numbers. And I thought that was mutually beneficial to all of us.
100%. Well played.
And so I got nominated, and 8 people ran that year for Student Council president, and I came in second. And I thought, you know, if I'd spent a little more time at this, I could have got elected. They paid you $6,000 a year.
Nice.
You only had to take 2 courses. And they had a budget of more than $1 million. Okay. So when I came here several years later, they asked for a student council rep, and it was like a moth going to a flame. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. And then the president of the GBC said, we'd like you to run for president. And I went, okay. And I had come here because of the exchange program with Laval University. You could go off and spend the summer in Quebec and working, and then going to Laval for a year, and then coming back to finish. And then the head of the small business consulting program said, do you want a job? And I thought, there were only 6 consultants. I said, sure. So then I went, oh, student council, Quebec, small business consulting. So Quebec suffered and jumped into small business consulting, and then I found there were a lot of people that came forward, recognizing that when you take on responsibility, you can control your future. If you try to avoid responsibility, you're controlled by someone else. So that became very clear to me, and I always wanted to control. So there were a number of job offers, and I said, and I was just saying earlier that when I was graduating, I said to my potential employers, I want to take the first 6 months off after I graduate to travel. And a number of them said, no, you got to start right away. I said, no, I'm traveling. And so I got a job at Merrill Lynch, and the fellow said, you can take 6 months off. And I hopped in a converted army truck and drove from from London to Kathmandu, and then by boat and plane and bus through Southeast Asia before I came home. So you start seeing the world in a different sense. But it was also a lesson in putting down your foot and saying, this is what I want to do, and that is my priority, and it overrides your timing schedule to start work. And it was a really good job.
Amazing, yeah. And that was during conversation with Pratika just before we started, who is graduating now. You just saw her as the current president of the GBC, who is still open for offers. So if there's anybody in the room, talk to her. Rob, it's no secret, and we just already talked quite a bit about this. You're not afraid to obviously buck conventional wisdom, or don't listen to anybody else in the room. Amazing. Pursue new and uncharted path. I think that's been a consistent part of your story. But there's one really unique story that I think demonstrates this more than any other. At least for me, there's a personal component to it. How Rob disrupted the status quo of an entire industry. Back in 2000, when you were still in the midst of this unheard of 46 months long union strike we just heard a little bit about at one of your mines in Northern Ontario, you launched something called the Gold Corp Challenge. With more than $500,000 in prize money on the line, new sources of gold with the prize money as the incentive. Finding new sources of gold, and the prize money was the incentive for anyone who wanted to look for this gold. So the subsequent discoveries your challenge sparked led to an estimated 6 billion of added value. Your Gold Corp challenge was groundbreaking and daring, to say the least, and is today the stuff of Canadian business legends. In fact, it's a chapter 1 in Don Tapscott's book, Wikinomics. That's how I came across this back in 2006. I was teaching digital marketing. I came across this book. It had just been published. It changed my entire course. And the first chapter was the Gold Corp Challenge. And every year, every term I taught this class, I would start the class on first day with the Gold Corp Challenge. I would take the paragraph that explains the challenge, how here's this company, the geologists have generated tons and tons of data looking for gold, but couldn't find it, couldn't locate it. And the big question was, and Rob was running out of time, it's all part of the chapter, and the challenge is, how do we locate this gold? So it's an amazing, obviously, treasure hunt. And then I would ask the class, what would you do? And in all these years, not one student actually gave the answer that Rob found in this Gold Corp Challenge, which is an incredibly innovative answer. Maybe Rob tells us a little bit about it, but it just shows innovative leadership mindset. And one of the questions I think that I have is, how did you develop this mindset? And how do you foster a mindset of innovation continuously for yourself, but also for your organizations?
Well, you want to have a very broad perspective and take in many different areas, like read extensively. I have to say that growing up, I loved science fiction and I loved history, and I think both of those play a very important role in helping you make some lateral connections, because you're relying on what's happened in the past and what might happen in the future. Looking at areas that you think might be impossible to happen. So I'd say that I have an intense sense of curiosity. So I'll poke my nose into places and say, now why is that like that? And wonder. So if you can keep that sense of wonder going on. I came out of the investment industry and moved into the mining industry. I had a closed-end funding selling at a 50% discount to its net present value. At the same time, gold stocks were trading at 2 and 3 times their NAV. So I thought, well, if I take this closed-end fund, take over a mining company, I might be able to lift the value of my shareholders by 4 to 6x. Mm-hmm. We did more than that, but that was the thing. But when I went into the mining industry, all of a sudden, well, first I thought, I'm not a miner. I don't have a mine engineering degree. I don't have a geology degree. So there's people running the company that I just bought control of. I'm going to let them run it. And after about 6 months, I said, I don't want them running it anymore. So I stepped in as the CEO of 2 mining companies, and I found myself, it was like stepping into a vat of quick-drying cement. I couldn't move as quick as I did in the investment industry. If I had an investment, I didn't like it, I'd just sell it. But I couldn't do that in the mining industry. Anyhow, this mine had a history of poor labor relations. It was high cost. It was thought to be near the end of its life. And I said, but it's right next door to a big, rich mine, and it had a history of mining rich. So let's put money into exploration. We put $10 million in exploration, and a mile below surface, we started finding really good grades or concentrations of gold. So a couple of years go by. The strike's on. Our share price should have gone down, but we're making discoveries, so it kept staying up. And my head of operations came in and said, we're going to build a new mine, a new process plant, because it was quite old. And I said, yes. How big? He said, this big. I said, that's pretty small. Yeah, but that's based on what we found. I said, but we're already we've been adding to our resources at a rate of 30% a year. So I went to the head of exploration. How big is this deposit going to become? He said, I don't know. Wrong answer. And then I said, how long is it going to take you to find out? I don't know. Another wrong answer. So I'm thinking about this. At the same time, I've enrolled in a course at MIT on IT. And that's through an organization. If you have a chance, I'd highly recommend an organization called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. It's a great organization to get involved with. Can really help your career. Anyhow, they have courses at various universities, and there was one at MIT on IT, and they had the dean of the engineering, the dean of computer science, the dean of business. And on the second day, right after lunch, they started talking about Linux and open source code, and I had been wondering, how am I going to ask the world to tell me where there's more gold? And all of a sudden, the light bulb just went off, and I said, there it is. I'm going to run back home. We're going to take all of our geological data, throw it up on the web, along with a big bibliography, and we're going to ask the world, where are we going to find the next 6 million ounces of gold?
Which is something no other mining CEO would have done. I mean, so that's
yeah, it was
clear.
like Coke giving away their formula.
Exactly.
So,
So completely breaking the rules.
so there were 1,500 people from 50 countries that took down a 400 megabyte file. And you saw just a cornucopia of input. There were people coming in with organic solutions to what everybody thought was an inorganic problem statement. There were people using advanced mathematics or computer graphics. The winning submission had incredible computer graphics. When I opened up the file, I almost fell on the floor. I said, where did this come from? I've never seen anything like this in the mining industry. And when I figuratively picked myself up, I got on the phone and called 3 institutions that had heard the story for a couple of years and never bought. And I said to each one of them, give me 15 minutes this afternoon. And I went over, presented, showed them. At the end of the day, they bought 15 million shares of the company, and it just kept going. And I learned that the biggest gold mine in the world is not in the ground. It's between everybody's ears. And how do you connect with those? Mm-hmm. And the second is, it's how you define the problem that you can generate alternatives that often people that are in a specific industry can't see. Mm-hmm. So it's the benefit of being outside an industry. Mm-hmm. So we also, well, my largest expense once we got the new gold going in was income tax. So I didn't like paying income tax. And I thought, why don't we hold back our gold and not sell it? Then we don't have to pay tax. And gold is one of these magical metals that you can get liquidity in 2 days. So Mike Harris was the Premier of Ontario, and he said, well, they're going to lower the tax rate by 6% over the next 4 years. I had a positive view on gold. So I said, well, let's hold on. And we held back 10% of our production. And then I said, well, let's do more. And we were holding back 30% of our production. And sitting in the vaults at the CIBC in downtown Toronto, we had we had 200,000 ounces of gold. And our income was large enough to cover off all of our G&A and our exploration. And we became almost like an ETF, and Fidelity became our largest shareholder. Right. Yeah. But it was our financial strength increased by the reciprocal of our tax rate, because we weren't giving it away. And you could borrow on a pre-tax basis, and if you needed it, you just liquidate in 2 days. So it was, the industry hadn't done that before either.
Yeah.
But
so it's combining also completely different skill sets, right? You would rarely find in sort of one person. You had already understanding of the mining at that point, of the mining industry, but obviously you're also an investor, an investment mindset, which I think accounts for all these radically different ways of looking at a problem. So if you don't combine it in one person, like most of us don't, then find a team perhaps and,
Yes.
and build teams that bring that together. It's an incredible story, and the term crowdsourcing really came. I mean, it existed before, but it was Don Tapscott's book that really made it a mainstream term. And Don Tapscott started the book because of this story. They were neighbors, Don and Rob. And Rob, you told the story over barbecue, and you started the book. So if you're using the term crowdsourcing today in such a sort of mainstream way, thank you for that story and for making that happen. Amazing. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about mining. It's you've been a really strong advocate for improving mining's public image, well aware of its historical image. You've also argued that even the toughest critics of mining ultimately have to recognize we really need it. It plays an important role in building our environment. If you want to have a sustainable future, you still need mining. If you want to have a prosperous future, you will need mining. And you also believe that there's growing awareness of the industry's vital importance in terms of technological progress. Maybe, I'm not so sure. I'm as optimistic, but we're going to change that tonight. How, for example, mining is critical to the growth and expansion of artificial intelligence. So I'd like you to tell us a bit more about your thinking and actually doing around rethinking the role of mining and actually the complete reconceptualization of mining. But before we go there, Rob asked me, can we show the audience a set of short video clips? And they're amazing. So I said, absolutely, let's do this in the context of this question. So there's going to be 2 advertisements that you'll see, and then there's going to be a video that Rob, you commissioned. Would that be the right term? You commissioned a video that talks about a really amazing, totally transformational mining project. It's McEwen Copper is building a mine in Los Azules.
In Argentina.
In Argentina. And it's dubbed the world's greenest mine. So we're going to see that video as well. It gives you a look at that amazing mine, and we have 2 commercials. So if we could have you guys up there run those clips, please.
We could do the one without. Yeah. Yes. This is a world without mining and what disappears.
Wie im Traum seh ich was, glaub es kaum. Alles was von Hand gemacht, das geht grad vorbei. Ich schau mich sing ein Lied davon, dass nichts mehr geht. Komm mit mir, egal wohin, nimm meine Hand und lauf. Stell dir vor, wie im Traum seh ich was, glaub es kaum. Alles was von Hand gemacht, das geht grad vorbei. Sag mal, weißt du wie es hier sehr ohne sie? Ich nimm dich mit auf mein Weg, sing mein Lied, das noch blieb. Sag mal, weißt du wie es hier sehr ohne sie?
That was without mining. This is without hydrocarbons.
Right.
you ever considered how much your world depends on petroleum-based products?
So, this is brought in an architect 3 years ago, and he said, I want to see you. We want to redefine and transform the image of mining in the world. And how do we do it? And what you'll see for what we're proposing in the Andes in Argentina is coming up.
McEwen Copper is planning the world's first regenerative copper mine in Argentina. It goes without saying that we need to transform industry to provide us with the materials we need for a renewable society, but without the historic legacy of environmental damage. Copper is one resource that will only grow in importance as we replace fossil fuels with a decarbonized world. Electric cars, wind turbines, batteries, solar panels, and the computers that power everything all require copper. And that copper needs to be green copper, carbon neutral and ecologically responsible. When we started the project, we began by drafting a set of principles for the project that would guide the team in its decision-making and approach. We did this work informed by the place itself. The Andes are an incredibly beautiful and sensitive ecosystem, so we knew it was our duty to be stewards of this place, protecting habitat, glaciers, water, and life itself, while at the same time getting the copper resources that we need. So we've been thinking carefully about the future first and our eventual legacy. We then focused on the people, the miners, and the community itself. And we've been working to create a new kind of experience for people that live in San Juan and the surroundings. Over the life of mine, over 1,000 high-quality local jobs will be created. And these will be jobs unlike any others in the industry. We think people will covet working for McEwen Copper because not only do we focus on safety, but also on dignity and livability, creating a mining facility that is an oasis in the sky. Here is our vision for the mine camp of the future. Beautiful, inspiring, and bold. A biosphere of health and life. After a long day of work, our people will return to a place completely powered by the sun and creating ideal conditions for rest, sleep, recuperation, and the daily needs of miners. Imagine a place that grows its own food, collects and treats its own water, and generates energy without emissions on a giant solar super roof. We are placing specific emphasis on indoor air quality, acoustics, and stress reduction with a focus on social justice, equity, and even beauty within a mine setting. This will be a place to live and thrive while earning a living. We're designing an ecological water treatment valley that not only completely protects downstream water quality, but allows for the creation of new habitat and the enhancement of vegas. Partnerships with local universities and scientists will see new advances in natural phytoremediation, water treatment, and ecological testing to ensure that water is always pure and healthy. Our entire mine operation will be powered by on-site and off-site solar farms, generating all electricity without carbon emissions. Wherever possible, conveyors and fleet facilities will be electrified and plugged into this network of clean energy with batteries instead of diesel for backup generation. At Los Azules, we are not building a mill. Instead, we are advancing heat bleaching techniques to extract metals chemically and in a completely closed-loop process with radical reductions in energy and water requirements as a result. And finally, a state-of-the-art, renewably powered electrowinning facility will produce pure copper, so that from the pit to the product, our investors and customers know that sustainability informed every single step, and they can count on that for their own ESG goal setting. Our planning process continues, and we look forward to sharing more innovations as we develop this amazing project further. At McEwen Copper, we are striving to deliver the world's greenest supply of copper in the world's first regenerative copper mine.
All right, amazing. Not the image I think most of us have in mind. Then you think about
That's what we wanted to change.
Yep. So you've been a bit on a mission to do this, to change minds. But we also saw two provocative commercials or messages before. There's also something there, which is you also want, I think, to change the perception or the understanding of the importance of mining. And then close the loop by saying, and we can do it this way, which is very different. So tell us a little bit about how you arrived at, and you've become an advocate. You've given speeches, and you're really outspoken about this, evangelizing around this. So tell us a little bit how
Sure.
you became.
Pretty much from kindergarten all the way through adulthood. Today, you're informed that mining degrades the environment, is something you don't want. And yet, this building and everything we live in today has come out of the ground. So, but that's not taught. And it's like a coin. One side is the bad side, and the other side is we can't live without it. When you look at the projections for the energy transition, for AI data farms, and all of that, you see a supply deficit coming along, which is meaning there's going to have to be more mines. One friend of mine said there's more mines have to be created now and more production than has been produced since the beginning of time to meet the demands for the energy transition. So that means there's more mines coming on stream, but how do you get the privilege and the social license to do that? We all have pictures that have been put in our minds of 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago of the destruction that was done to the environment. But today, the amount of stewardship has come a long way. And if you saw the great lengths people go to try to protect the environment. There are accidents along the way. They happen in every industry, and mining accidents tend to reinforce the negative. But we're going, if we want to go and enjoy this life, we're going to need more metals. If we want to control climate, we're going to need more metals for the equipment that's going to protect the climate. And that's why I've been pushing, I pushed our auditors, our investment bankers, our lawyers, and all our suppliers to say, look, we got to talk about the other side. We got to talk about the government. Everybody who derives revenue from the mining industry should be thinking about protecting the revenue stream and talking about the merits. I can say in Sudbury, International Nickel, Inco, has smelters, but in the past, those smelters produced acidic fumes that became acid rain, and it killed all the vegetation around Sudbury. The the rains came along and washed all the soils away. And then NASA, when it was testing its lunar rover, decided to come to Sudbury to test what it was going to use on the moon in Sudbury, because Sudbury looked like the moon in certain parts of it. Today, that's all been rehabilitated, and it's all forest where they tested the lunar rover. And I think there are a number of examples where we've seen the environment protected. And what you saw here of what we want to do in the Andes, I mean, every time I go there, I have my camera out. And I said, did I take a picture of that? Because the landscape is just beautiful in my eyes. And we're looking at building a hotel there once we get the mine up and running. There are Inca trails not too far away. And if you're a photographer, the sun sets on these slopes, and they're cascading with all sorts of pastel colors, the minerals coming out. So you want to protect that, but you want to create a jewel on the side of the land that not only the community's proud of and the country's proud of, but the company's proud of being there. And we have to get that message out and coexist. And I also think that it's one of, Canada has huge resources, and I've been to the Middle East a couple of times looking for money recently. And I go there and I'm going, there are a lot of things happening there that aren't here. There's not much litter on the streets. There's not much graffiti evident. There's very little crime. You don't see much homelessness, all of which you see lots of here. And they're buildings, beautiful buildings popping out of the ground all over the place. There's construction going on everywhere. And I'm thinking, this is all based on natural resources. Right now, we have this large country, all sorts of natural resources. It takes a very long time to bring a mine on stream, maybe 15 plus years. And saying, why aren't we developing these natural resources? We have the science now to protect the environment, and we're doing that. And getting more export revenue, which will prop up our dollar, because people have to buy Canadian dollars to buy it. And rather than letting our dollar go to 60 cents or 50 cents, it could be at a premium again. And I just, I wonder when we're going to do that, and how we can be a very integral part in addressing the issues of climate change. So that's why I'm doing that.
And I think, I mean, I think it's a really amazing approach, because I think nothing is more powerful than actually having an example that people can go and look at to see we can actually mine this way, and I think to change minds around mining, as it were. And I think it's really so sorely needed right now. So congratulations, and thank you for doing that. And you already got us with your last comment there around what you see in other countries, and why aren't we doing this in Canada? You get us to my final question, so we still have some time, hopefully after that, for the audience question. And look, everyone here is following the news. We're all in the middle of a war, and it's a trade war with the US. As one of Canada's biggest entrepreneurs, CEO, you're following this closely. You're obviously thinking deeply about what is going on here. How do we respond as a business, but also how do we respond as an economy, and even as a country from a political perspective? And I would really like, and I think the audience would really like to hear, we're all asking these questions ourselves right now. We're trying to find answers in the newspapers. I don't think there's much to see there. We have you here tonight. Can you give us some answers? How are you thinking about what's going on right now?
I would have hopped on a plane and flown to Washington, sat down with Trump, and said, what are the issues that are bothering you about our country? How can we address them? You don't go about and say, well, we're going to put counter tariffs on and effectively punch your largest trading partner in the nose. He's just going to retaliate on that. I mean, he's an alpha male. He's just going to come at it hard. And we seemed, and you think of, well, we're going to put counter tariffs. We're not going to sell them any more aluminum. We're not going to give them any power. We're not going to sell them lumber. And I said, are you guys crazy? I mean, that's where we get our export revenue. Our Canadian dollar is going down to 10 cents if we do that. It's just, it's ludicrous. He might be difficult to deal with, but he does have some problems, and we have this unguarded border, and we have drugs going across, and we have immigration coming in that he doesn't want to see. Let's fix those things. And maybe he'll modify his approach to us. But no, I don't think it's a good policy to punch any of your customers in the nose, but particularly when we have 75% of our exports going there. That's, you want to try to get some conciliation going on, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, and it could be a moment also for us to actually have this conversation to understand what is it we can do together better. The legitimate concerns, one could argue, they may not be communicated in a way that we as Canadians particularly appreciate. We probably would do it differently, the concerns that are coming from the South, and communicate them. But it also, I think, might be a moment for us Canadians to nonetheless ask ourselves, what do we want to do?
Yeah. A vision for the country.
A vision for the country, right?
We don't have, that's not being articulated right now by any of the politicians. And it needs to be.
Yeah. We have 5 more weeks of an election cycle. Not much time. Maybe something will still emerge so far.
Well, if we get all those trade barriers between the provinces eliminated,
that's one.
That'd be good. As a start dealing with some of the delays and start building on the natural resources we have and the other skills that we have.
Yeah, our entrepreneurs and really supporting those. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe it's waking us up a little bit. If nothing else, maybe that's what it'll do.
And we should go back and counter and say, you know, you're going to become the 11th province.
Yeah, maybe we offer, you can turn it into 4 different provinces. Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rob, that was great. And we still have some time left, I think, for some questions. And I think, Pam, you're going to...
I can navigate the questions. So we've got microphones. I can't see very well. So, okay, there's one up at the back on each side. So we've got a few folks raising hands. So I see some up near the back. So why don't we start up? We'll kind of go one side, the other side, one side, the other side. So in the back corner there. And you have to speak into the microphone so that we can capture it with the video. So thank you.
Yeah. Hello, hi. My name is Christian, and I work for Canada Post. So on the corporate strategy team. So I think you mentioned politics as potentially being a point of friction to realizing Canada into the richest country per capita in the world, given the golden egg we all live in. But I guess my question is do you really think that's the biggest impediment to realizing that vision? The friction faced by politicians and them thinking that they create the wealth? Or is it something else?
Could you restate that?
Sure. Is the biggest impediment to Canada becoming the richest country per capita in the world based on its resources, is it the politics?
Absolutely.
Or is it U.S. interference? Or do you think it's the politics?
Politics.
And what might we be able to do to turn that around, given how, let's say, anti-capitalistic, anti-wealth, anti-industry we have become as a country?
Well, I think it's important to change the mindset of Canadians. I feel right now a lot of people are feeling that the world's closing in on them. They're not going to be able to advance. And I'll use an example. I walk by Casa Loma quite frequently, and each time I walk by, I say, thank you, Sir Henry. Sir Henry Pallet built it, the castle. It was 98 rooms for himself, his wife, and his one son. And I thought, you know, he had a lot of optimism. and just going, how do we get Canadians feeling that the world is opening up rather than closing in on them? And the politicians, there's permitting issues. I mean, natural resources is just one side. The trade barriers that we have between provinces, the pipelines we should have built so that we're not dependent on imported oil when we produce large amounts of it. We're a compassionate society, but I think we've gone too far. And we've put barriers in place that won't allow us to grow. Each time I went down to Argentina, I'd come home and I'd say, Argentina is a preview of what Canada is going to become. And it wasn't until President Milei was elected last year that their fortunes are turning around and they're looking to attract capital. Canada was built on foreign capital. We still need lots of foreign capital to build the assets in this country. And unfortunately, there are a large number of people that Cheryl and I know that have left the country. They've given up on the country and said, I want to be in another part of the world where there's not as many regulations, there's not as much taxation, there's not as much delays. And I think we have to stop that flow and turn it around, that people are coming here to invest because it's an environment where you can, the rule of law is respected and it's exacted quickly, not long delays.
Mm-hmm. And where success is celebrated.
Yes.
And people want to build things, yeah.
Great, thank you for that one. One on this side, there's one down near the front on this side. Our runners are getting their steps in here.
Hi, Rob. This is Siddharth Sid from the Global Mining Management program of Schulich School of Business, class of 22. I've been a natural resources professional throughout my career into oil and gas and then studied mining here. Terrific industry. My father works in natural resources as well. So I've seen the kind of impact that natural resources create in development of community, right? Firsthand, remote places, development, transforming lives. So absolutely, I resonate with a lot of sentiment that you have shown in the advertisements. My question to you was, and I think like you kind of like answered some parts of it, with the realignment in geopolitical climate and US not as a safe export market for Canadian natural resources, what role do you see for Canada in meeting both energy and the natural resources demand of the developing part of the world, which is like India, China, the southeastern markets? If you have some sort of a thought there.
Well, with the geopolitical strife that's going on around the world, a lot of countries and corporations are looking for new, secure sources of supply. So there's a ready market for most of the products that we produce. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But you're seeing countries placing big bets all around the world, cutting deals with various companies or countries to secure the source of supply. China has taken over Africa. The US last August signed an MOU with Argentina to develop their mineral industry. You're seeing, it's just everybody, I mean, in our copper company, we had the 6th largest car company come along and become a shareholder, our 2nd largest shareholder. And then the 2nd largest mining company became a shareholder. They're all trying to secure supply because they can see if you don't have that, your economy is going to be handicapped. No, there's a race right now. And Saudi Arabia came along. I was there in January. They have a big mining show. They started 4 years ago with 7,000 registrants. It was 27,000 registrants this year. And the Saudi government saying, we love mining. We want to make it the 3rd most important industry in the country. We'll give you money back on exploration. We'll allow you to own 100% rather than 49% of a company previously. There's no foreign exchange controls. You want to build a process plant, we'll put up the capital. They've got lots of money, easy transportation, labor is plentiful, and a government that it was so refreshing to see that type of attitude. But they're disruptive right now, and they recognize that the world ahead of us is going to be resource scarce. And so they want to lay claim to those sooner than later.
Which, again, points to the opportunity
it's
you
huge
would have here if you had the political will to actually unleash this.
Yeah, the mining industry right now is at least in North America and Europe, is experiencing a real acute labor shortage. It's that negative impression that everybody has of mining, that influenced a whole cadre of students going through universities. So there's been precipitous drops in enrollments in the schools of mine engineering and geology and all sorts of other schools related to mining. So there's competition coming up there, and you're saying, well, where do we go from here? I mean, automation, robotics, AI are all going to be needed to carry forward. But to develop a mine in Canada from discovery to production is 15 to 20 years. I mean, it's just not something that's like a light switch and you can turn that supply on.
And how would that compare to, for example, Saudi Arabia?
If you can get, well, first getting a deposit, you have to drill a lot of holes in the ground.
Right, but let's say you got that, so same.
So if you're doing that, the permitting is very quick. It's the crown prince. He just says, look, this is what I want. You're going to do it. And it's a rather nice system.
Undoubtedly. And so it's 2 years, 1 year?
They push it as fast as they can.
Incredible, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, even countries like Bhutan wants mining. I had a delegation in from Bhutan. And the king says, okay, I want mining. And I said, well, all right, this might be difficult there. You got big mountains and rivers, and you got to take things out of mountains to get minerals. But it's going on all around the world right now, and it's an industry that isn't in a lot of portfolios. It can generate enormous wealth, and it's a generous industry as well from philanthropy. I mean, Seymour Schulich, although he said it was oil and gas, but Franco-Nevada provided a lot of the money that did this, and he's donated more than $250 million already, and I think when he said in his bequeath he'll be over $1 billion. That was one of the good things about coming to Schulich, that I became friends with Seymour, and he's a fascinating individual, but he's someone who pushed the school along and had ideas, brought the subway, really got behind the subway to come up here. And he's a proud Canadian and wants people to contribute and build the country.
Yes.
And he got a scholarship when he went to McGill, and rather than, he invested it, and he made more money investing it.
But he were two most prominent philanthropists, out of mining. So clearly, you're right.
Peter Monk was huge too.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. Are there also careers for business graduates from business programs?
Sure. Project management, M&A, treasury if you're into finance. There's foreign exchange controls, all of that.
So it's really a message also to the students that are in the room, right? There's a shortage across.
And then AI, what the courses you have here. The costs of consumables have been going up. Labor has been going up and in short supply, as I said earlier. We're going to need a lot more work on AI from a standpoint of exploration, cutting down that timeline, production, smooth lining that, increasing recovery rates, maybe even looking. I mean, one day I think you're going to see the confluence of AI, nanotechnology, coming together and creating elements that replicate what's in the periodic table in a factory. Like you can make diamonds today artificially. Can you create those properties one day in a factory? And you won't have to dig it out of the ground. But if you haven't ever been to the Royal Ontario Museum, they have a wonderful mineral collection, and I think it would just amaze many of you of the incredible beauty that you find below the surface of the earth. It's just remarkable there. Our gold mine in Red Lake, which caused Goldcorp to go to the moon, you would see a seam of gold coming up the wall and going across the ceiling, which in mining is called the back, and back down. It just, and then you let someone hold a piece of gold, a gold coin, and they go, there's something here much more than a Bitcoin. And when the electricity is shut down, you still have the gold, and it's still accepted, but you can't get to your wallet.
There you go.
Yeah, so you forget your password.
Let's do one more question. I'm going to go with Anita. Do you still want to ask a question in the middle? Yeah. Oh, hang on, Anita. We're going to pass the mic.
My question relates to the topic that you had about delays in getting mines permitted in Canada, because I think right now that's an area that we really should be focusing on. So as I look at it, I see that it's the negotiations with the Indigenous, because anybody who wants to develop a mine has to come to agreement there. Another one is the environmental side, which is keeping things apart. And I'm wondering, from your point of view, what are the most significant areas of delay, and where should we really be focusing our efforts so that we can get Canada to where it should be on that side?
You have multiple layers of approval, municipal, provincial, federal, that should probably be all put into one somehow, or two. You also have issues with the Indigenous that, whether it be we have right now a lawsuit filed against us. And we had bought a company that had bought a company before that. So the first company said, we'll give you 25,000 shares and or $150,000 a year, whatever is less value. So that company, the 25,000 shares, another company came along and bought it, and it was 10 shares of the company that owned it for 1 share of the new company. So 25,000 went to 2,500. And then that company got into distress, and it was ultimately, we bought an asset from it as it was in a quasi-receivership. And then it was taken over by another company that it was 11 of its shares for 1 of the new shares. And the agreements were very vague on share consolidations, takeovers, and the like. And so there's a disagreement as to who is responsible. When we bought the assets, it was supposed to be free and clear of all liabilities. And they're coming back and said, well, the first company didn't pay us, and the second company didn't pay us, so you should pay us. You're going, well, I'm not sure that really works. They were supposed to take care of that. And then they made complaints to the ministry that our tailings were leaking in Timmins, which wasn't the case, and had been fixed. And we just did a $100 million US, what's called a cap call convertible debt. And they were putting out press releases to try to stop that deal from going through. Now, they feel they've been unfairly treated because they didn't get what's going, but this is going on all over the country, and it's like intersecting Venn diagrams. Everybody has historical hunting grounds, but there are many people claiming the same space. And so we need to resolve that process and what the proper compensation is for it, and what is the time to settle on an arrangement. The Ring of Fire which is southern James Bay. There's a road that they've talked about for at least 15 years now. And there are 3 tribes that are arguing over who should have that area. So it's a big issue, but it really needs to be resolved. I've asked the Minister of Mines if I could get involved with some AI work on the permitting process and saying, how do we streamline this? Can we look at what are the obstacles that have delayed the process, and can we find solutions to it? And is AI one of those areas that we could be working with? So,
But is the indigenous issue the only one? Is environmental permitting and regulations another one that is really delaying things unduly, or?
Well, you have three agencies, municipal, provincial, federal, and they all have slightly different rules on when they come and when they don't come. Mm-hmm. There's not a sense of urgency, and I think Canada needs a sense of urgency, where we have too many regulations and there are too many levels, and it's slowing down the process and reducing the standard of living for all Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to wrap things up. I have I like to do a few takeaways from what I've heard, just to sort of summarize with the audience. And I'm going to start with the last one that I wrote down, which was that mining really was the first industry that had to figure out how to navigate multiple stakeholders. And here at Schulich, sustainability and the idea of multi-stakeholder is very much core to what we're all about. And I think we can all learn from how you have been navigating through these various different multi-stakeholders. And it's an art, very much about relationships and thinking differently. So I think we can all learn from what mining has gone through and what you have gone through in particular. You started by talking about your problems are all relative, and I really liked that, and the reframing of problems with maybe a simpler but an alternative solution, right? And sometimes you need perhaps a fresh perspective to get at that solution, like using AI to figure out how the ministry can move through things, right? Back to the Goldcorp Challenge, those kinds of things. You said taking on responsibility, by doing that, you can control your future. And I thought that was a really interesting takeaway for all of us. So thank you for that. And then finally, we need to build on our optimism, and we really need to step up our sense of urgency. So I think those were all really good takeaways from me in this whole thing. So very much appreciate the time that you spent with us today, the wisdom that you have shared with us, and we have a small token of appreciation.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you so much.
It's great.
Yeah, no,
Pleasure.
that's wonderful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you. Thanks. Can you sit? You want to
Okay,
sit
yeah,
down?
have a seat, and we'll just do one or two
Sure.
more things.
Just turn off the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Just in case he says something. All right, before we wrap up, I just want to alert you to a few events that are coming up. We're holding our number of our class reunions in May, Friday, May the 2nd. I can't remember all the years. I just remember mine was last year. It was great. It's 35 years. I can't believe it. But we had several last year, and we have even more reunions this year. So make sure that you find out if your class is eligible and who your class champion is, and head out there. A really good time to sort of reconnect, reminisce, celebrate. Also, just wanted to note tonight that we have alumni here from more than 50 years of graduating classes. So pretty amazing, right? Like there's a whole breadth of you. Then lastly, we've got Connect, which is on Saturday, May the 3rd. And this is our, one of our most anticipated events, alumni events of the year, bringing together, we've got faculty, we've got staff, we've got industry leaders, of course, alumni, students show up. And this year's theme, New Horizons, exploring today's most pressing challenges. We heard about a few of those in discussion tonight, and tomorrow's most exciting opportunities. So early bird tickets are available, so make sure you get those. And finally, just thank you to everyone tonight for coming out, for your engagement. We had some wonderful questions, and really hope you enjoyed this edition of the Dean's Leadership Dialogue series, and we hope to see you at the next one. But for now, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.